Jacob Riis, The Social Reformer by Isabel Butler. Jacob Riis was born in Ribe, Denmark on the 3rd of May, 1849 and immigrated to the United States in 1870 on a steamship at the age of 21. Apparently, all he owned at the time was $40 and a locket containing some hair from the girl he loved. But that did not stop this man from making a lasting legacy on America's poor urban environment. Without Riis's help with reforming the housing policy in New York City, the largest city in the United States would not have the living standards that it has today. After a series of odd jobs such as ironworker, farmer, bricklayer, and salesman, Riis gained some valuable first-hand experience with the ragged poverty side of New York City life, and became a police reporter for the New York Tribune in 1873. He was assigned to the Lower East Side, which was overrun with crime and poverty, and discovered that in some tenements the infant death rate was 1 in 10, or 10%, which he revealed with his self-taught photographic skills and allowed the public to see what he experienced while he worked at night. Spurred on by his interest in New York City's tenement life during the late 1800s and the harsh conditions people endured while living there, he used his camera as a tool to bring about change in America's urban environment. Before him, this downtrodden underclass was only previously read about at most, and not given an extra thought to, almost as if they were a myth. Riis began photographing every indoor and outdoor scene in the New York slums with a flash lamp, from crowded tenements to dangerous slums and street scenes. These photos are some of the first examples of flashbulb photography invented in 1864, so Riis was a pioneer in the use of it, but he did more than just introduce a new type of photograph. He first helped in the establishment of the Tenement House Commission in 1884, which helps with the construction of improved and acceptable tenement houses in New York, and is very important because it set requirements for the design of buildings, such as windows facing a source of fresh air and light rather than an interior hallway, and a better garbage removal system. This ensured that tenants would have a more natural and sanitary aspect in where they resided. In 1890, Riis published the book How the Other Half Lives, telling and displaying the awful living conditions to the public in a way that was not going to be ignored due to his eye-opening and captivating photos. These published photos appeared in books, newspapers, and magazines for all to see, and were accompanied by statistics about New York's poverty, such as population density per every acre in the slums, and number of deaths in the tenements in New York, which was a staggering 24,842 in 1888. Riis said that his motivation for presenting such dark photographs and information was that every man's experience ought to be worth something to the community from which he drew it, no matter what that experience may be. The book was an instant success due to his photographs and even his writing style, and as a result, his career as a social reformer was launched. At the time, Theodore Roosevelt was the police commissioner intent on improving the quality of life for New York citizens, and immediately began working with Riis after his famous quote, "I have read your book and I have come to help." Riis showed the future president the horrible conditions in which so many people lived, and Roosevelt immediately closed the worst of the city's police lodging houses, which were described as simply tramp lodging houses. Once Roosevelt became governor, he demanded that city officials pass the first significant legislation to improve the quality of life in immigrant neighborhoods, known as the Tenement House Act of 1901. This act had a significant impact on neighborhoods like Greenwich Village and the East Village, because the buildings in these areas are now new law tenements, which are now very well known all over the country. This also kick-started the muck-raking journalism that took shape in the United States after 1900, which was a movement of reform-minded journalists who wanted to expose large institutions and leaders as corrupt, as a way of social change. Major examples are Ida M. Tarbell, shown on the left, who exposed the oil business, specifically John D. Rockefeller, and Upton Sinclair on the right, who investigated into the dangerous working conditions of the meat-packing industry. Riis was also considered a muckraker because he exposed the harsh living conditions in the slums, which resulted in these tenement acts and such. Over the years, Riis helped influence and spread information about New York City's poverty, and during the last 25 years of his life, he published other books on similar topics such as his autobiography, The Making of an American, published in 1901, The Battle with the Slum, 1902, and Children of the Tenements, 1903. Along with these documentary books, Riis had many separate writings and lectures done on lantern slides on topics relating to the improvement of social conditions for the lower classes, in order to better inform the general public. At a time when people in poverty were usually portrayed in calm or sentimental settings, Riis displayed the horrifying details of people living in real-life destitution, which often shocked his audiences. His portrayal of his subjects, however, typically emphasized their humanity and bravery amidst their appalling conditions, and this encouraged his audiences to have a more sensitive attitude towards the poor people in this country, once they realized how they actually lived. After his death in 1914, however, his once famous photographs eventually became forgotten until 1947, when some of his negatives were found and put on display in a retrospective exhibition in the Museum of the City of New York. This displayed how Riis was one of the first people in the United States to use photography as an instrument for social change, and he is now a legend for his use in photography to bring the hidden worlds of the slums of New York City to light.